last few weeks, I've been preaching from lectionary passages, which are passages given by the world. I don't know who the body of people is, but and I usually go with the gospel lessons, and I've been going with the gospel lessons of Matthew. I like it because it brings some intentionality to my life. Of maybe last summer we were reading a lot of Luke, and this summer it's a lot of Matthew. But these last few weeks in the Gospel of Matthew, there's a word that just kept coming back to me over and over in these passages, and that's the word vulnerability. A few weeks ago we talked about compassion, where Jesus says to the Pharisees, I do not desire mercy, which is also is back and forth between, the word is back and forth between mercy and compassion. I desire compassion, not sacrifice. And we talked about if you want to be compassionate towards others, you have to be compassionate towards yourself. There's no middle ground in that. If you aren't aware of your story of strength and struggle in your own life, it's hard to be compassionate towards someone else's story of strength and struggle. And last week we talked about what is it that we need on our journey and the ability to ask others for help and what we need. Those invitations are vulnerable, invite us into deep vulnerability. And this week, Jesus shares that much of their journey together will be arduous, painful, filled with rejection, failure, and questions, and could result in strife, as Bradley so eloquently read at the end. Is going to bring about some family drama. It's going to be divisive for people, and it could even bring about death in your life. Where do I sign up, right? I remember coming to faith when I was 15 years old, and I felt like it's been a long time. One of the things, I love being a pastor, but sometimes I wish I could just go to other churches just to see what other churches are doing. But then that would leave my position here open. It would create some issues. But when I came to faith when I was 15 years old, I felt like, and I feel this is how faith came upon me, is that I was sold, you get on board with this. I was just kind of a loner kid. I mean, I didn't have a bad childhood. But I was looking for community and friendship and all that stuff, and I found this group of guys that went to church. And I felt they sold me a gospel of like, you get this Jesus guy on board, and you're going to be good. You're like, no more problems, no more anxiety, no more heartache, no more loneliness. And I'm like, where do I sign up? This was not the words we heard today. They didn't give me that spiel. They gave me a different spiel, like, all your problems gonna go away. I don't know if any of you all have walked in or experienced church in that way, to where you kind of felt like that was the message that was given to you. You do A and B, it's going to equal C. Great life. So that's kind of what I was sold. But then I realized these people are kind of messed up too. Like, there's cliques, there's people who don't like each other, people who talk about each other, there's gossip, I'm like, these things exist in the church. I was told that, this stuff wasn't here. That anxiety that I felt before I knew Jesus was anxiety I felt after I knew Jesus. That loneliness that I felt before I knew Jesus, I still felt that loneliness after I had a relationship with God. And then when you're in the church walls, it begins to be this. Well, if you're feeling those things, you're not praying enough. You're not praying enough. You're not reading enough of the Bible. You're not faithful enough. You're not showing up enough. But the truth is that in my years of wisdom now that I've gained is that life is just hard. Life is complicated. There's a ton of difficult decisions that we have to make in our lives and choices to make. And Jesus has never guaranteed that those things go away. And in fact, in this passage that Bradley read this morning, it sounds like Jesus invites a whole array of different problems. I'm really selling y'all on this Jesus guy here, right? I think there is a sense of embracing this Jesus that we tend to run away from, particularly in our American culture, that we need to hear Jesus out on this. Because Jesus invites us into an immense vulnerability that when people are against the disciples and that when the world is against us, Jesus' message to them and to us is not to lean out, but to lean in. His message to them is not to give up and run away. He invites his disciples to remember that their lives are of great worth, meaning, and purpose, and that not everyone's going to see that. Isn't that a hard reality to cope with, is that you are a beloved person of God and not everybody's going to see that. I was thinking this morning in my life, there have been people who said, I would not be a great pastor. But I've had people tell me you're too introverted to be a pastor, you don't talk, and I internalized those things, and I really thought about it. Maybe I need to find a different career. And I'm pretty sure we all have those people in our lives that have really said some things to us and really have messed our head up. And then every time that we make a mistake or a failure, that voice comes in, right? They told me. And Jesus to his disciples is, let's get one thing clear. You're going to face a lot of resistance, but let's also get another thing clear. You are of great worth to God. And that there's going to be conflict and there's going to be complications. And I loved the words that he says to them and invites them to lean into, is that what I tell you in the darkness, tell in the light, and what I whisper to you, proclaim from the rooftops. I'm drawn back to Jesus' inaugural sermon in Luke. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recover of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. We sometimes forget that in these words that Jesus sat down, and then what does any biblical scholars in here, we're all biblical scholars, remember what happened next. What did they try to do to Jesus, the town? They tried to kill him. Throw him off a cliff. His greatest sermon that we say this is what we need to do. His hometown tried to kill him. The question that Jesus invites us into is, what injustice, broken system in our world is God calling us to speak truth to injustice? Or another question, what pain, difficulty, fear are we running away from? What is it that is whispered in the depths of your mind that you keep putting to the side? This is where the vulnerability is invited to us. What is that whisper in you? What is that thing that you say, I need to do that, and you just keep putting it off? What is it that you need to name that you fear? What is whispered in the depths of our souls that we need to bring to the light and proclaim? I don't know about you, but I keep a lot of things in the depths of my mind sometimes. Maybe an idea. Maybe something that I need to do for my personal health. Or maybe an act of standing up for somebody that has no voice. A lot of times I don't say anything or I don't do anything. It's because I fear failure. Is there anybody with me here? I can't stand the thought of failing something. Because so often when we fail something, the moment when we need to have an immense kindness of ourselves, we internalize and personalize, and we beat the heck out of ourselves. And so in that idea in our heart, and we go, I need to do this, or I need to stand up for this issue, we go, I'm not going to do it, because if I fail, I'm going to do that to myself, and I don't want to hurt or injure myself. When I think about people who, for women's rights, I've heard time and time again of people interviewed and said, what are you going to do after the Supreme Court, has made this abortion legal, and especially in 12 different states where people are changing their laws? What are you going to do? I'm going to go to Congress people's office. But they're not going to listen to you. I don't care. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to fail. I'm going to keep going and going and going. I'm like, I get run away if somebody tells me no. And here are people who, this does not look good, but they're like, I'm not stopping. I'm going to keep going. Or people that go to city council and they advocate for a neighbor, and they say no, but then they come back next month. Well, I'm going to come back. I'm going to advocate again. Jesus teaches his disciples a depth of resilience. When you fail, when someone says no, just get back up. Just get back up. If we want to make a difference in our world, if we want to make a difference in our lives, we have to be willing to fail. If we want to be creative, we have to be willing to put an idea out there and let it fail. And then for us, and then for those of us who say that's a great idea and it does fail, we need to be the kind of people that said, we tried. Not like, well, I didn't like that idea. Let's just confess, we've all been on both sides. I didn't like that idea to begin with. But instead to say that we collectively join in. Like I talked about last week, the other thing we fear in our hearts is rejection. To me, rejection is scarier, because we, in rejection, internalize it to say something is wrong with me. It invites shame. But the reality of our world is that there are people who see the world differently than you and me. That's just the reality. Which means at some point on our journey, we're going to be rejected. But so often, because of fear and rejection, whatever we hear in the dark, whatever we hear whispered in the depth of our souls, I just think in this room there is an immense creativity that is existing in this place. There is a passion for injustice, but I also think in so many of our hearts there is also a great fear of failure and rejection. And so a lot of times we steer clear of anything that will cause us discomfort. In a church that says at the end of each service, may God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that we might live deep within God. I butchered the last part of it. What I believe is that Jesus was inviting his disciples, and he's inviting us into a value we carry as a church, and that is to be courageous. It's a value to say, I'm willing to be vulnerable and to say, you know what, I have this idea and I'm really scared of failing. And naming that. Naming something disperses all sorts of emotions, because somebody else is able to say, I hear you, but I'm with you. I know that you fear failure, but if you fail, I'll fail with you. But so often we just kind of buck up, the white man in us. In me, let's speak for myself, but the person in me is like, I got this, but what if I name, I'm actually pretty scared. Can you go with me? Can you be with me? Jesus on this journey invites us to risk failure and rejection. And what makes life beautiful is the courage to wade through this discomfort and to be vulnerable. Courage for our community is one of our values. And to me, values mean most when life is the most difficult, not when everything is going great. And so we ask ourselves how to be courageous in moments where we are struggling. This past year, Isaac and Laurel, two of our kids, learned to ride their bikes without training wheels. And a couple of parents ask me, when they come over and they see them riding their bikes, they're like, "How'd you do it?" And I'm like, "Well, for $50, I'll teach you." Well, it was simple. I took their training wheels and I threw them in the trash can. They got really mad at me, and I didn't care. If you want to learn to ride your bike, you're going to have to, the start is here. The bike has no training wheels on it. I will help you in the process, but I will never, ever put those training wheels back on for you. And so if you're taking lessons right now, that's what you do. And so over the next couple of days, there was me running down running back and forth, wobbling. There was scraped knees. There was scraped elbows. There was crashing into the curb. Like, there was all sorts of things. It was a dangerous pursuit. But then there's that moment of, I feel my body. I feel like balancing. I feel the wind on my face. I can do this. And to see, after all the scrapes and the bruises and falling off and the screaming, I want my training wheels back on, there's this face of like, I did it. I did it. To me, that's what courage looks like. It's, what is it that is being whispered in the depths of my heart? What is it that God is telling me in the dark and He's telling me to take it to the light? What is it that is holding me back? And to be vulnerable enough and to experience amount of discomfort to wade through that. And expecting that God might do something beautiful in our lives. So as I end today, I want to invite us just for a few moments of reflection. What is it that is being whispered in your heart that you need to proclaim to the light? Is there something you need to do? Is there something you need to advocate for? God, we give you thanks for this space on this Sunday. To hear that the way ahead can be arduous and difficult, complicated, but also to hear that we matter deeply to you and that there are also beautiful moments here and now, moments to come. Help us to lean in for what we need for our lives so that we might better care and love one another. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Every time we come to the table, we recite these words before us. I invite you to say them with me. This is not my table. This is not our church's table. This is not our denomination's table. or an American table, or a table reserved for the wealthy or well-connected. This table is reserved for sinners.